Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Half and Half. Scott and I were talking this morning about twisting. I was thinking about the obliques. Um, and sometimes in beginner work, we don't get into twisting as much in Pilates. It's like comes a little later. We do all this other stuff first of just strengthening the abdominals. So I've noticed sometimes in this class, we don't always get to twisting. So I thought that would be fun to start with in Pilates. So, yeah, I hope everyone's doing well. Last Saturday in August, we're about to start our World of Fall coming up. I know that looks a little different for everybody. A lot of it being online, some of it being in person, some of it reluctantly, some of it excitedly, I guess. But yeah, so here we go. Here's our last summer day, and let's twist about a little bit. So let's start on your back. And just kind of look at a couple like body halving things. So when I say body half, you could think of the body as having a center line, a midline. Some people call this anatomically the mid-sagittal plane that cuts you in half right to left. And then working like this very right-sided way and this very left-sided way, right? And that's sort of like half the body halving, doing all right side, doing all left side. And then twisting is more related to opposite side work. So the right arm and the left leg may be moving together. And we generally call that cross-lateral work or contralateral work. So we're going to play a little bit with both because both are really good for the obliques. And then as we get the obliques sort of understanding the stability of those things, then we can start moving into twisting, which is also something the obliques do. And we'll have maybe a little better sense of that. So we're going to start on your back with your knees bent and your feet flat. Big surprise, right? We never start like this. And that center line, right, goes right from your head, kind of splits you through the top of the head, through your nose, through your chest, and down through your pubic bone. And then I have my legs hip distance apart, which you might be able to see is not super wide. So when I think about my hip distance, I think about kind of the center of the right half of the pelvis and the center of the left half of the pelvis, not lining up with the outside of the pelvis. But that joint is more central. So it's not super wide, but the center line is clearly, in between my legs there. And then just take a moment and breathe with that image. So you feel your body on the floor. You have a sense internally of where that midline is in your body. Imagining it visually or kind of using your inner awareness to feel that space in your body. And so all the time when we do knee folds, that is somewhat dealing with that body halving idea. I keep my center line very steady. I use my abdominals to do that. I keep my pelvis steady side to side. And then I just lift one leg. So I'm going to lift my right leg, my knee over my hip. And then I'm going to add in my left arm. So now I have the contralateral or cross-lateral idea. Right arm, left leg. Everything comes back down. And the whole time I try to keep that center line really steady still. So we'll do the same thing with the left leg coming up. Hold it there. Now you might notice your pelvis wants to tip towards the left is most commonly what happens. So the abdominal work has to do with holding your center line really steady, holding your center, feeling really steady. Then we're going to go opposite arm, right arm up. And then everything back down. So play with that movement together. So the stable center line, opposite arm and leg up, and back down. And then switching to the other side. And observe your tendency. So maybe you notice a pretty pronounced tendency. Sometimes the pelvis will tip really in a very obvious way. or your shoulders or your ribs will move in a really obvious way. So then you can really, slow down and try to correct that as best you can. But sometimes it's more nuanced. Sometimes you have to pay closer attention, move more slowly, because you get just these little tips side to side, these little counterbalances side to side. So that's when imagery is often pretty useful, is to keep that really solid, clear image and notice if things change, when things change. I'm going to finish up my last one, ending with the left leg and right arm. And then everything back to the floor. And take a couple breaths. Just feel like your whole torso settle. And then just to kind of experiment how it feels to do same arm and leg, which actually is generally more awkward. We don't do that as much, but might give you different information. So I still have my center line. I'm still going to try to keep my pelvis in place, my rib cage in place. I'm going to go same arm and leg up and down and try to pay attention to if my weight changes, if my pelvis starts to tip or my ribs start to shift. And a couple more of these. And then I'm finishing with the left side. Next time you finish with the left side. I'm just staying here. A couple breaths again. Okay, so let's take a little more of a whole view. So we're going to think right half and left half working together now. So we've had this opposite arm and leg, opposite arm and leg. Then we had same arm and leg, same arm and leg. Now we're going to do everything, right? So that becomes more the image. So my hands behind my head, my elbows lifted. You've done this before. And then I still have a sense of like, okay, there's my center line, both the right and the left half of the pelvis. I'm going to imagine they're evenly weighted on either side. Both sides of the ribs evenly weighted, and then head comes up. And then stay for a breath. And as you exhale, the head can come higher. Pelvis stays evenly weighted, right and left half. Ribs, especially lower ribs, evenly weighted. Drawing in, right and left half. Lowering down. So here we go with a couple of those. Exhaling. And coming up. Inhaling. And exhale. Coming up. That nice long pubic bone length through my legs. And back down. And two more. Exhale. Inhale as you're up. And exhale. A little more. And then take your arms down. Okay, so now we're going to get into a little bit of twisting. So if I want to twist, my upper and lower body positions have to have a kind of an oppositional feel. So if I want to twist and I think, oh, I'm going to twist over to the left. And as I twist over to the left with my upper body, if my pelvis starts to go with me, that's not twisting, right? That becomes this body half thing I was talking about. This, I have my pelvis and my ribs are still in the same place. I just rolled onto one side. So that's obviously a big exaggeration. But if I'm going to create a really solid twist in this exercise, I'm going to think of my pelvis staying in place so that my rib cage, my upper body can twist around and over to the other side. And as I get more and more over to the left, the more I have to think about this right side staying really steady using the belly. So that's going to be our basic idea. So left hand down and right hand behind your head. We're going to have your elbow more to the ceiling than normal. Usually it's a little out. Just take it straight up towards the ceiling. And just to get a feel for this, my left arm is going to stay kind of dead weight. I'm going to keep my pelvis centered. And then as I exhale, I'm going to just rotate around a little bit. So my left elbow is pointing more towards, my right elbow towards my left knee. My left arm, my left shoulder is pretty much in place, but my right shoulder has come across. So play with that movement a couple times. Exhale, little rotation. Inhale, back down. And sometimes people will ask the question, where should I feel this? And the answer is a lot of places are correct, right? You might feel it a lot of different places. It's no one place you have to feel it. But one thing that's really obvious to me is it feels different on my right and left side. They're not working in exactly the same way. And as you come down this time, staying down. And then we're going to switch it up. So right arm down, left arm behind your head, elbow pretty close up to the ceiling, just to kind of keep it out of the chest. When I reach up and across, there's going to be a tendency to shift all my weight onto my right side. My knees maybe want to go right, my hips want to go right. I'm going to try to keep the pelvis in place and the knees towards the ceiling. Just let my upper body rotate. And back down. Of course, not doing this super fast. It's always, if you go, easier to pay attention when you move a little more slowly. So it's not the goal to be really quick. It's the goal to be a little more attentive. One more time. And then resting down. I hope that went well. If you want to do that same thing again, do that same thing again. If you want to add another layer, we're going to bring the knee into that knee fold now. So it's going to look like this. I'm going to reach across. I'm going to keep my pelvis steady, and I'm going to bring the left knee up. Now, I don't want to get super into like, oh, I have to touch my knee. I don't know where my center line is as I do that. Things crunch up all over the place. That's not necessarily my goal. My goal is just to create a little more complication and then see what my body does with that. So pelvis stays steady, leg comes up, and I do that reach across. My elbow is going towards my knee, but it's not anywhere near touching it. And back down. So either leaving the foot down, what we just did, just doing the upper body, if that's working for you, or adding the leg in. I have to work to keep my awareness on this right side of the pelvis on this side. I have a hard time keeping that down. So I just have to think about my abdominals a little more there. So I don't tip my pelvis. One more. And as you come down, I'm going to switch. Left hand behind my head, right arm just Just kind of loose and relaxed. Find your center in your pelvis. Draw your ribs together. Reaching across, the right leg comes up. Contralateral or cross-lateral, whichever one is easier for you to remember. Using your exhale to lift. Last one. And then relaxing everything down again. So I'm starting to feel pretty warmed up in my upper abdominals. My lower abdominals starting to come on too. So hopefully you're starting to get that feeling. So again, we did our body half, we did our contralateral, we did all four. Now we did our contralateral again. We're going to go back to a whole sort of feeling in the belly with the 100. So sometimes in 100, I've talked about you can keep a hand behind your head and pump one arm, and then halfway through, you can switch and pump the other arm. That's actually a great practice for the obliques, for this body halving idea that we're talking about. So if that's the way you do your 100, that's going to be, you know, really effective for this particular theme as well. If you like to do it with both arms, also can be great. So arms are up to the ceiling. Or one hand behind your head and one arm up to the ceiling. Keeping both sides of the pelvis grounded, dropping both parts of the lower ribs. We'll bring the legs up. I'm going to do tabletop. You can take it like you like. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. So this great sense of my center line through my body, from my head out my pubic bone. My legs are drawn together towards that center line. Both sides of the pelvis really grounded. Ribs really drawing together on both sides. Maybe you switched hands. If you haven't, you probably want to do that if you're doing one hand. Inhaling and exhale. And last one. And then bend everything in and relax. And then come up to sitting. Okay, so we could take what we just did, lying on your back. We tried to keep your pelvis steady, and then move the rib cage without the pelvis moving too, right? So now we're going to try that sitting up. Now, little more challenging thing about sitting up is that you have less feedback from the floor, right? You maybe don't feel as much of your pelvis on the floor when you do it. And probably you've heard cues in classes when you're sitting of like, oh, as you twist, keep both sits bones on the floor. You may have heard it in this class. And that has to do with this exact thing. If I twist to the left and my right sits bone comes up, it means my pelvis has moved over to the left and I'm not really twisting. If I keep my pelvis in place, and in Pilates we talk about using the lower abdominals to do that, and then I create a twist, then I'm gonna feel that sits bone on the floor. So you could just play with that feeling for yourself a little bit here. Explore it however you want. You could do it standing too, or if it's not comfortable to sit like this, or you could have your legs out. Just kind of get a sense of like, okay, yeah, I'm making some movements in my vertebra a little higher in those kind of rib cage part of the vertebra, but I'm leaving the lower vertebra and the pelvis really steady I'm using my belly to leave that really steady. And then that is how I end up in a twist. So we're going to add a little, we're going to use that concept and make it harder. If I'm being honest, we're going to make it harder. So bend your knees, have your feet about hip distance apart, and then slide your pelvis a little bit under so you can feel a little more in the back of your pelvis. Grab onto your thighs. And then walk your hands down a little ways, enough so that you feel your abdominals are having to work, and you can feel a little more of the back of your pelvis on the mat. That's going to be helpful for feedback. Now, the same basic concept as we did before. You've got this work in your belly. It's holding your pelvis really still. You're going to keep that. Your upper body is going to rotate a little bit around. And as you open this arm, I've got my left arm opening, and you kind of follow it around and look at it. Don't roll onto your left hip. Try to keep your belly working. Your rib cage moves and twists open. And then you come back to center and grab on again. And then you do the other way, drawing your belly in. Your rib cage starts to rotate around, but you leave your pelvis really steady. And back to center. And then rotating around. The more I rotate, the harder I have to work to keep my pelvis in place. I'm putting more force. All the force wants my pelvis to tip. So my belly has to work harder to keep my pelvis from tipping. And then as you come back to center, this time come up to sitting, take a little pause. And we'll do that whole thing again. And this is something you could do sitting in a chair, maybe. I guess it would be a little hard because you have to lean back, but maybe on a stool. Or you could definitely have your hips maybe elevated a little bit on a blanket or something if it felt too tight in your hips. But let's see if we can go again. Rolling back, feeling the back of your pelvis, feeling your abdominal muscles on. This already is an exercise, right? A lot of work going on here. Now, if you wanted more challenge and it felt like it worked for you, you could take both hands forward. But I'm pretty happy to hold the backs of my legs here so that I really feel a little bit of work in my right arm helping to hold me, helping to connect me into the right side of the belly. As I open to the left, I really hold on, feel that left half, left body half, and then rotate it. And back to center. And if you can get that without holding your leg and you want to try that challenge, still got to work the same muscles. You just don't have that feedback from your arm. One more each side. And then rolling out and sitting up. So another really great example of this contralateral force and stability and center line and all this stuff is your leg circles. We're working with that all the time in the leg circles. And in leg circles, what we're doing actually is actively inhibiting a rotation, a twist. So when I do my leg circles, my single leg circles, I'm on my back, I have one leg up. And this here with my leg up to the ceiling, well, the weight's pretty centered. It's right over my hip. It's not putting any force on my torso. It's just kind of set up this way. As soon as my leg goes across, my weight wants to go with it a little bit, right? If I wanted to keep taking my leg across, it's going to pull my weight. So I only take my leg as far as I can keep my pelvis in place, my center line steady. Usually that works pretty well for people. We go down, we're back to center again when the leg is in line with your hip. Now this is the hard one. As soon as that leg goes out to the side, whoop, all my weight wants to go to the right. right? Wants to create that twist. My shoulders are here, but my pelvis is definitely twisted. So generally, the work in single leg circles is to inhibit that rotation, to use your abdominals, to hold everything steady, to keep your center line against the weight of that leg and that changing force. So here we go. Let's find your leg circles position, single leg circles position, maybe a little bent knee. And no matter how you usually do this, today you're going to pay attention to what range of motion in my leg keeps me really steady. It might be smaller than you sometimes do, or it might just be different. You might find like, oh, I actually can go pretty far across without moving, but I can't open as far as I thought I could. Or actually, I could go a little lower than I thought. Maybe your circle is an oval. My circle tends to be an oval. The other thing I like about single leg circles, a little bit like I was talking last week, you really feel the work change. I'm working my abdominals the whole time, but as my leg moves, it feels a little different. Different things feel like they're working harder at different motions in the circle, different points in the circle. Same thing in the other direction. As you open right away, try to keep the pelvis in place. Inhale. Exhale. Ribs stay in place too. And then taking your right leg down. Reset everything. Find your left leg. Pelvis really centered as the leg reaches up. And then notice as you go across over to the right, leave the left hip down. Lower down, everything comes to center, leg is centered, and then pay attention as you open. Don't let the pelvis move. And I mentioned earlier, I have a hard time sometimes keeping this right hip down in some of the exercises. So I instinctively put my hand there just to give me more feedback about whether that hip is moving. So you could do that. You could take your hand and put it right on your pelvis. And then same thing in reverse. I don't open very far, just a little bit. Across and back up. I can open a little and then my hip wants to come up, so I just do a little bit open. And then I can go across pretty nicely. And one more. And then bend your knee and rest your leg. Now just take a moment with everything on the floor and take a couple breaths. Let your hips relax. You might have worked your hips a little differently. And so you might have little muscles speaking to you now. So just take a moment, let them all relax. And then, however you like, find a way to transition up to sitting. And then I'm going to find a way to transition as well. And let Scott pick up from here.
Hello, everybody. So in yoga, we have a lot of twists, And as Colette mentioned, very often what people do is when they intend to twist their spine, they end up just kind of moving their whole torso side to side. And so we're going to build on that idea of keeping the one part of the torso relatively steady, and then almost like you're wringing out a dish rag to get the most twist up between the shoulder blades where it's most beneficial. So let's start off with your feet wide apart, and then turn your left foot in and your right foot out. So let's make a few movements to warm up the hip sockets. Exhale, bend your ankle, your hip, and your knee, and then inhale, straighten. Up and down like this. Now, those of you who study with me very much, you know that I'm not a fan of square the hips, because I've seen how many people end up with a torn labrum in their hip by trying to force that movement. So I am studiously taking my knee straight out toward the side, that for sure. And then I'm comfortably opening my pelvis up, but by no means forcing it open. That old instruction, like your torso's between panes of glass, break the glass. So next time, knee in the bent position, pausing there. Couple breaths here. Now with the next out breath, tip your hips. Let your spine, neck, and head follow. Place your elbow on your knee and your hand on your hip. So once again, don't square your hips super hard on the hip socket. If you imagine that your navel was a flashlight, have the flashlight shine on the floor. A little bit turn your belly to face down. Now to get the benefit of a twist, keep your pelvis and your belly facing as they are. As you turn your head up, neck, shoulders, and upper chest. So there's that ringing quality in your spine. Ringing with a W. Couple more breaths here. And ride the next inhale up. And turn back toward the front. Second side, turn the right foot in, left foot out. Knee goes straight to the side. Exhale, bending. Inhale, straightening. So in these variations, there's a series of yoga poses. Triangle pose, side angle, warrior two, to name a few, that have more or less this orientation here. So you can probably see my torso is by and large facing the camera, but I'm not trying to force any kind of right angles on the body. The hip socket, the bony structure of the hip socket, is just not designed to be at that kind of crazy angle. Couple more. So next time, knee in the bent position, pausing there. Few breaths here. Now with the next exhale, tip your hips. So yes, my torso is by and large facing toward the front, but if you look closely, you'll see that my belly and pelvis ever so slightly faces toward the floor. Then keep that orientation in the lower part of your spine. As you turn the upper part of your spine toward the ceiling, head turns, neck turns, shoulders turn, upper part of your chest turns. Few deep breaths. Ride the inhale up and turn back toward the front. Let's try a variation on that point. Turn your left foot in, right foot out. Exhale, bending. Inhale, straightening. Next time, knee in the bent position, pausing there. Fourth, coming out breath, tip your hips. Elbow to knee, hand on your hip. Then this time, taking your left arm up, and a little different twist toward the floor, turn your head and neck. Deep breathing. And then with the next inhale, coming up and turning back to the front. So different varieties of twists, aren't there? Different intentions, different benefits. Second side, turn your right foot in and your left foot out. Movement follows breath. Exhale, bending. Inhale, straightening. Couple more. The next time, knee in the bent position, pausing there. Pause here for the in-breath. From your pelvic bowl, exhale, tip. Let that tipping of the pelvis move your spine, move your neck, move your head. Good. Then left arm goes straight up toward the ceiling. Then a slightly different form of a twist toward the floor, turn your head and neck. And then inhale, coming up. Turning back to the front. And then stepping your feet together. So notably a not twist right now, but it reinforced that idea of midline that Colette introduced a little bit earlier. So taking a moment to feel your feet on the floor, no more needs to be done. That might not seem like much right there, but that's the act of feeling your body embodying, which can be really calming for the mind. Then from that direct experience of feeling your feet contacting the floor or the mat, take your pelvic rests and lightly lift them up to the ceiling. And use that slight lift to lift your chest and your head. And a few deep Pilates breaths. Inhale into your back. Lightly extend the exhale to connect to your belly. A few more breaths, connecting the midline. Then stepping your feet wide apart. Turn your left foot in and your right foot out. Deep inhale here. Exhale, bending your knee. Deep inhale here. Exhale, tipping your hips. But this time, instead of elbow to knee, catch your shin with your hand. So now in a few moments, what we're going to do is lengthen midline. Keep the crown of your head where it is. And to lengthen your midline, slowly straighten your front knee. Notice how that draws your pelvis away from your skull. And how your belly has to turn to the floor to accomplish this, doesn't it? So keep your belly facing as it is. As you then turn your head to the ceiling, neck, shoulders, take that upper arm up. Steady breathing. Inhale, coming up. And turning back toward the front. Very different than how I learned triangle back in the day. And there's a time when whenever I did triangle, my back hurt. I didn't know why. It's because I was over-rotating in the sacrum. So this technique here to get the good benefit between the shoulder blades and not over-rotate the sacrum is take your right foot in and left foot out. Exhale, bending. That's the opposite of straightening. Pause with the knee bent for the inhale. Then exhale, initiate the movement from your pelvic bowl, like we did earlier. Not getting off at the subway stop, elbow to knee. Take the next stop. Hand to your shin. Now remember midline. Intention here is to lengthen midline. Keep the top of your head where it is. Slowly straighten that front knee. Notice how part of the process of elongating is your pelvis needs to roll toward the floor a bit. So wherever your navel is currently shining, keep it there as you turn your head, neck, shoulders. And we'll take a few breaths here. Now I have kind of a funky left shoulder these days, so I'm going to keep my hand on my hip. Deep breathing. And with the next inhale coming up, turning back to the center, and then stepping your feet together. So in a few moments, we're going to make our way to the floor, using a sun salutation to get there. So start by inhaling into your back. Exhale, arms to the side up. Let's see if my arms fit in the frame. Inhale, folding. Exhale, gorilla. And then stepping your feet back to downward facing dog pose. And we'll take a few breaths here. Then full deep inhale. Exhale, coming down. And then transitioning to your back. So you already did a view of twist on your back. And now we're going to take a variation of that theme. So starting off on your left side. So knees draw in on your left side like you're in the fetal position. So draw those knees in real nice and snug. Now, I know there's some tradition that say your knees have to stay one on top of the other. I'm not so big on the rigidity of having to keep knee on top of knee. So sort of an approximation, keep leg stacked on top of leg as you take your right arm up toward the ceiling. And then rest the back of your head on the floor. If the back of your head doesn't comfortably reach the floor, you could put a pillow or rolled up towel to support the back of your head. So already we have a little bit of a twist going on, don't we? So now all that space back behind you, take your arm into that space far enough. Now, very often we get really hungry here that the hand has to come down to the floor. And that can actually really jam up the shoulder joint. So if you notice, my hand is probably a good foot up off the floor. And then what I'm focused on is reaching my fingertips out. And then as I reach my fingertips away from my spine, right where my arm inserts into the shoulder socket, I'm going to let the head of the humerus drop to the floor. And we'll take a few breaths here. And then exhale, sweep that arm back up. And now the other side. So that was the left side. So now, fetal position on your right side. So knees way drawn in. Take your left arm up. Rest the back of your head on your pillow or on the floor. So maybe you already have a sense of your midline. Then into the space back behind you, take that arm. Far enough. So rather than trying to get your hand to the floor, it's going to really jam, really put an impingement in the shoulder. Reach out through your fingertips. Try and stretch your fingernails away from your spine. And then right where your arm bone inserts into your shoulder socket, that's called the head of the humerus. Let your humeral head drop to the floor. So getting the hand to the floor, not very important at all. But grounding your humeral head is. Few breaths here. And exhale, sweeping that arm up. And then rolling to your back. And then coming up to sitting. So a little bit earlier with Colette, you were working on seated twist. We're going to explore a variation of that theme. Start with your legs straight out in front. Then bring your right foot up and over. If that pinches in your hip, keep that foot on the same side. So whether it's same side foot or crossover foot, then we're going to take left arm across. Again, you have a choice. It could be your hand holding or your elbow catching. Then right hand behind. So the flashlight, searchlight, that's your belly. Turn that light to face straight forward, in my case toward the camera. And then turn your head, neck, shoulders, upper chest. Few breaths here. And releasing back toward the middle. Both legs forward. Now bring your right foot in. Could stay same side. Could cross over. Now to turn to your right. So right hand or elbow. Left hand behind. Now as Colette pointed out at the outset, very often when we're going to go turn, whole torso comes along for the ride. So there's just no twist. Sort of the illusion of a twist. So I'm going to keep my belly pointing straight forward toward my front foot. And then I'm going to keep my belly there. There's that stability. So I turn my head, neck turning to the left, shoulders, upper chest. Steady breathing. And then come on back toward the middle. Taking both feet forward. So twists have the potential to create nice movement in the spine, which some people experience as feeling energizing in their spine. Into the part of the spine right between your shoulder blades. Take a deep inhale into that space. Then with the exhale, sweep your arms to the side, up. Inhale, folding forward. Steady breathing. A few more breaths here. And then with the exhale, rolling up. We'll take some time for guided relaxation. So in general, a lot of people like to recline for the guided relaxation. Could be on a bed, or the floor, or a sofa. And personally, I like to rest my hands on my belly. And you can probably see that I like to keep my knees bent, but I take my feet apart so my legs can rest into each other. Then leg muscles can relax. If you feel comfortable doing so, closing your eyes. And now invite awareness to your midline. The line that includes your spine, your head, and your tailbone. Very often we pay attention to that center line when there's pain. What a shame, because there's so much vitality in that center line that's always available for us to contact. So to help contact, embody your center line, invite awareness to your tailbone. And then from your tailbone, invite awareness up into your sacrum. And then from your sacrum, inviting awareness up into your lumbar spine. And your lumbar spine having 5 vertebral bodies. And then from your lumbar, inviting awareness up your spine into your thoracic spine. Thoracic spine having 12 vertebral bodies. And then from your thoracic spine, continuing to invite awareness upward, now into your neck, into your cervical spine. Cervical spine having 7 vertebral bodies. And then from your neck, awareness continuing to ascend up into your skull. The back of your skull that contacts the floor. The sides of your skull corresponding to your temples. And the front of your skull, your forehead. And from your head all the way down to your tailbone. A sense of your midline. A sense of physically in your body. The experience of centeredness. Whatever that sense of centeredness may or may not feel like in your body. Now slowly, gradually opening up your eyes. And then as you feel ready, coming up to sitting. So Colette suggested this morning over breakfast a theme of twist. Really like the idea a lot because twist can be so energizing in the freedom of mobility in the spine. But freedom untethered can be anxiety producing. So the twists can be so wonderful in that they can create the freedom of mobility and yet the stability of centerline, centeredness. So really glad you could join us here today. If you haven't already, please check out our programs. We're rolling out an exciting new schedule next week. And we have so many great classes on the schedule. And personally, I'm psyched. I can hardly contain myself about the rollout of the mindful cardio program. And we're going to get together 3 times per week. You can access live or the recordings. And looking to help build our resilience for all the unknowns that we're wading into this fall. Building resilience by our cardio, doing movement like we just did together right now, and then meditation. So sure hope that you can join us. Any comments, questions? Yep, I see a nodding.
So a couple questions. One is basically the question is the hips in reverse triangle.
Yeah.
When you're working, do you let the hips go from head to pelvis?
Someone's asking about revolved triangle, and that's a yoga pose. And in revolved triangle, all the same ideas apply. Now, very often in that pose, people let their hip drop, and then they don't get the good twist. So there's that, non-benefit right there. And then also in letting one hip drop, then you end up putting the other hip in a really strong, what's called adduction, in a very deep flexion. Hips don't like that. So in revolved triangle, and sorry if you're not familiar with that pose, it's really urgent that the pelvis stays level and the one hip doesn't drop, both to get more benefit and to prevent potential harm for the front leg hip. Great question.
So with the femoral head to the floor, I felt the twist also in my hip.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So someone is asking about the grounding the femur heads to the floor in the twist, that they felt the twist in their hip as well. Yeah. So if you're referring specifically to this twist right here, there's going to be a lot of benefit out through here. And this is going to be one of the reasons why I don't teach the pigeon pose, is that all the benefits of pigeon you can get by doing this twist right here without the potential risks that you find in pigeon pose. So I hope I'm understanding your question correctly. And if I didn't, please ask in a future class.
with an S-shaped spine, what does extension and flexion mean? That's a pretty broad question.
Yeah, so someone's asking about an S-shaped spine. What does flexion and extension mean? So that's a really long answer, but to keep it real brief, is that anytime you arch backward, what we call in yoga a back bend would be spine extension. So in the upper back, that would be sort of reversing of the way it curves. And the lower back, it would just be more of the way it naturally curves. And we're going to lump all that under extension. And then in flexion, it's going to be the reverse. So when I'm folding forward in flexion, my lower back is reversing its normal curve, that's flexion. And my upper back is increasing the way it naturally curves. That's flexion too. So great questions, and let's keep connecting like this.